The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
I've been waiting a long time to put this amount of money into education.
Tonight on Politics Now, more money for K-12 schools. The first steps being taken to change how we pay for education. Near the end of the road, the work lawmakers still have to do as the legislative session winds down.
I think anybody who's been to an outdoor concert knows that there are folks consuming there.
Pot lounges and pot vendors. The Nevada Dispensary Association explores laws that could impact how the state's marijuana industry moves forward.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Thank you for joining us here on Politics Now. I'm John Langler. Lifting restrictions in a little more than a week. Clark County is going back to its pre-pandemic rules. Commissioners voted to fully reopen the county on June 1st. So that will include lifting restrictions on capacity limits, large gatherings, and dancing. Initially, Clark County said the vaccination rate needed to reach 60% before removing these guidelines. But this week, the commissioners changed their mind. So this means event companies can get back to booking parties and conventions. County Commission Chair Marilyn Kirkpatrick says the new Centers for Disease Control guidance spurred this move.
We've been doing really well in our community as a whole, as you just heard from Dr. Lagon. So we went back and we evaluated it, and as you know, the CDC came out and made some guidance last Thursday, which just had us evaluate it sooner rather than later.
It's worth pointing out, though, commissioners say if hospitals get overloaded again, the restrictions could return. We are quickly approaching the end of the eviction moratorium here in Nevada. It ends June 1st. The CDC's version lasts until the end of June. So if you're struggling to stay in your home because of the pandemic, Clark County has these recommendations. If you get a notice for eviction, file a response with the appropriate justice court. Requesting mediation triggers a review by the county. A caseworker will reach out and guide you through the county's rental assistance application that's called CHAP. Assistant County Manager Kevin Schiller says several agencies and departments at Clark County and the state are all coming together for this.
And with that moratorium ending, and as we move forward, this collaboration has not existed in the history of the state. So what this will allow for is a connection point between mediators, the CHAP Rental Assistance Program, and Clark County in conjunction with the courts.
About 9,000 people are currently waiting for their CHAP application to be processed. Clark County says it's bringing on more workers to handle those cases. A household of 4 making up to $60,000 a year is eligible for this assistance. The program itself has $160 million still, and that can help 40,000 households in Clark County. A bill introduced in the state assembly on Thursday would require courts to pause evictions for non-payment if the renter has a rental assistance application pending with CHAP. If the landlord refuses the assistance, the renter would be able to sue for wrongful eviction. Well, state lawmakers are facing a June 1st deadline to finish the legislative session with a lot of work left to do. The Nevada legislature putting its money where its mouth is on school funding now. A joint budget committee is giving an extra $500 million in new money for K-12 education in the next 2 years. Schools will also be funded through a new pupil-centered plan. It's been in the works for some time now, but until now, no new money was set aside for it. Assembly Speaker Jason Frierson addressed accusations the legislature wasn't taking education seriously.
Here we are now looking at, I think, historic support for public education, which, again, it doesn't happen on the sidewalks. It also doesn't happen on social media. While all that's going on, we're working with our staff.
It's not every day that you get to do something that I think will be significantly impactful for students, but I do think today is one of those days.
Money will go to the base amount given to schools for each student, about $9,100 for next year. Now, if you would like to learn about how that new pupil-centered funding plan works, we have an explainer video available for you at 8newsnow.com. Senate Bill 420 would create a public option health care plan, and it now has another amendment to lower some of the costs. The new part deals with a portion of the bill that expands who's eligible for Medicaid. It says the state would only expand the eligibility if there was money available. A previous amendment would also delay the start of a public option until 2026. Right now, that bill is sitting in the Senate Finance Committee and has not yet had a floor vote. Emergency gun legislation introduced by Senate Majority Leader Nicole Cannizzaro had its first hearing this week. Assembly Bill 286 bans ghost guns. It was amended to take out added criminal penalties for people who violate a private business's "No Guns Allowed on Property" signs. Senator Cannizzaro introduced a new bill this week, which introduces that legislation again. The Nevada Firearms Coalition calls the bill unnecessary. It claims existing trespass laws allow people to ban firearms at their businesses already. A few more bills have died after failing to make legislative deadlines. Some of the more prominent ones are AB 395, which would have abolished the death penalty; Assembly Bill 268, which would have required written use of force policies for law enforcement; and AB 339, which would have created domestic violence treatment programs in justice courts. North Las Vegas Mayor John Lee has a new party and a new target: Governor of Nevada. Lee recently became a Republican after serving for a long time as a Democrat. Well, the official filing deadline for running for governor isn't until March, so the Republican field is still shaping up. Mayor Lee says he's going to run for governor. Congressman Mark Amodei and Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo both have said they may run. On the Democratic side, Governor Steve Sisolak hasn't really drawn any big-name challengers yet. Businessman Don Ahern is the new finance chairman for Nevada's Republican Party. Ahern owns his own rental company in town and the Ahern Hotel and Convention Center on Sahara. This is some video from a Trump rally at the hotel last year. In fact, Ahern was fined for violating capacity limits there during the pandemic. He was also on former President Trump's finance team. Ordering marijuana with ease.
Customers really liked it. They really liked the ease of ordering online and being able to come and pick it up.
Will Nevada finally give people a place to smoke their pot? The Nevada legislature is still requiring masks in Carson City. Right now, fully vaccinated people can take off the mask within a legislative building, but the masks are still required in public areas of the legislative complex. Republican Assemblywoman Annie Black of Mesquite was censured on Thursday for violating those rules. In response, Black tweeted she was permanently barred for refusing to wear a mask on the assembly floor unless she apologizes. Well, assembly rules state she won't be allowed to vote or speak on the floor or in committee except to explain and apologize for the breach first. As we near the last week of the legislative session, one growing area of Nevada's economy hasn't really been addressed so far. We're talking about marijuana. Bills that deal with creating pot lounges, pot vendor licenses, and curbside pickup haven't gotten a vote. Recreational marijuana has been legal in Nevada for 4 years. However, no new places to use it have been created. I spoke with the new executive director of the Nevada Dispensary Association.
It's been a while since pot has become legal, and the discussion of lounges dates back almost to that point. How come it's taken so long to get this framework in place one way or another?
I think one of the key factors was having the Cannabis Compliance Board set up. So the Cannabis Compliance Board was created during the 2019 legislative session and just started on July 1 of 2020. So having that regulatory body modeled after the Gaming Control Board that is overseeing the industry, I think was a key factor in, whether this additional new license type that will require additional staff to enforce, and it's just, it's very new. I think having that regulatory body in place maybe gives some folks some security and thinking like, okay, now might be the time to do this. Also, the CCB conducted a study that they submitted to the legislature at the beginning of the session, assessing whether cannabis lounges, how that would work. And so I think those in combination really set the stage for what's happening this session.
There's also another measure that looks at trying to allow marijuana at large events, sort of like beer gardens and so forth. Assembly Bill 322, sort of pot gardens, I guess. Talk about this measure if you can, and why it might go move forward?
So 322 is sometimes referred to as like pop-up vendor events. So what it creates is a vendor license. So if you have an outdoor concert or something that is serving individuals who are 21 and over, there would be an opportunity to create an area that is designated specifically for consumption and allow individuals to vend, sort of like an alcohol distributor at an outdoor concert. They would be able to sell at the event in a designated location. And this is another bill that could create opportunity to enter the industry at a low cost.
Senate Bill 168 deals with curbside pickup for marijuana, which kind of came out of the pandemic as well. There's a lot of measures that took place during the pandemic that I'm curious whether they're going to last beyond the pandemic. And I guess this is kind of one of them. Talk about this measure if you can, and again, why marijuana dispensaries in Nevada are in favor of it.
Yeah, so curbside pickup was created by the governor's emergency order last spring in order to to reduce capacity in store and to make sure that there weren't lines in parking lots. And so it turns out customers really liked it. They really like the ease of ordering online and being able to come and pick it up. And especially for medical patients or elderly patients who don't have, it's more difficult for them to get out of the car. So they really liked it. And so dispensaries asked the NDA to bring this bill, and we worked closely with the Cannabis Compliance Board to draft this bill to make curbside pickup a permanent feature. And so far, the bill has gained bipartisan support, and it's on track to, fingers crossed, it's on track to pass.
What's the future?
The future is, continuing to work with the CCB. As the CCB gets set up and working with them on making changes to better the industry. For instance, one of the things that we're planning on working on this summer with the CCB is a more comprehensive review and reform of packaging and labeling regulations. And it doesn't sound super interesting, but it really is, because we have regulations for labeling that date back several years. Several years in this industry is like 5. But packaging has really changed since then, and our knowledge of the best ways to convey consumer warnings, the information that really should be included on a label, has evolved. And now, versus when we first started to now, other jurisdictions have come online. There's all sorts of public health expertise that we can bring in, including end users, and say like, okay, what's helpful to have on a cannabis label? And can we make the cannabis, should it look like a food label? And, if you're comparing two products, that you can easily make a determination between the two. Where right now our compliance our regulations are sort of outdated, and some of them were duplicative in terms of what needs to be on labels. So like I said, stuff like that, it helps advance the industry and go back and update and modernize some of those regulations that were put in place at the very beginning. I also think we have an opportunity to make the industry more environmentally conscious, look at some regulations that have to do with packaging or that have to do with other areas, and say, okay, like, we have gotten to a place where we have addressed a lot of the safety issues related to packaging and products, and now how can we evolve into the next sort of iteration? How do we go back through and make sure that we're being environmentally conscious as well?
Now, just after we did that interview, there was an amendment to the consumption lounge bill that we discussed. Independent lounges were taken out, so it will not include allowing people to bring a product into a licensed place to consume it there. She had mentioned yoga studios as an example. Now, we're going to stay on top of these bills. We will let you know if any of them pass before the end of the legislative session. Next on Politics Now, reviving tourism. The first meeting for a key subcommittee chaired by Nevada Senator Jackie Rosen. Plus, a potential ceasefire in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Nevada's Democratic chairwoman speaks out and gets condemned. After a week and a half, there is now a tenuous ceasefire in Israel as we tape this program on Friday. Reports indicate Israel's war cabinet has approved a unilateral ceasefire after increasing pressure from the Biden administration and other countries around the world. However, Israel has threatened to respond with a new level of force if Hamas keeps firing rockets at them. The White House was defensive when asked if President Joe Biden had done enough to try and stop the fighting.
Do you not count the 80 engagements we've had with countries around the world, including the president's call with the leader of Egypt, the 4 calls he's had with the Israeli prime minister?
I think it is shameful that the radical left of the Democratic Party is choosing this moment to try to undermine our friend and ally.
Joining us to talk about the White House's response to the conflict in the Middle East, Alex Limon from our Washington bureau. Alexandra, let's talk about the administration, the Biden administration's response to the conflict and where things stand.
It's been interesting to watch this develop, throughout the week, because we initially heard from the White House that President Biden had spoken to Prime Minister Netanyahu and had said that he supported a de-escalation in the conflict between Israel and Gaza. And the White House was trying to be as diplomatic as possible at that point. But as we all saw, it really didn't change anything. And in fact, we saw the bombardments just continue and hundreds of people die as a result. And so then later in the week, we heard the White House say that the president had talked to Netanyahu once again, and that had, in this case, asked more forcefully for a de-escalation on that day. And again, we saw that Israel's response was that that just didn't happen and the fighting continued. And so it kind of put the White House in an uncomfortable position, both diplomatically with Israel, but also back here at home, where we saw a lot of lawmakers, Democrats in Congress, telling the administration that they wanted the president to be much more forceful to try to get the conflict and the deaths to stop.
And on that note, some Democrats are proposing stopping an arms sale by the U.S. to Israel. It was about to go through. Let's talk about what the weapons proposal, the sale is, and why some Democrats want it to stop.
Right, and the issue is that these Democrats were kind of working against the clock here because they really had a really limited amount of time, something like 5 days or so, to try to stop that arms sale. It was about $730 million worth of JDAM, so it's equipment that essentially makes missiles more precise, and also, from what we understand, small diameter bombs. And so a lot of Democrats, really progressive Democrats in the House, were saying we should not be selling, any type of arms to Israel at a time when there is such a conflict happening.
And that was Alexandra Limon reporting from Washington, D.C. The new chair of Nevada's Democratic Party did issue a statement about the Israeli conflict, and it immediately brought criticism. Judith Whitmer accused the United States government of having, quote, too long turned a blind eye to injustice and violence committed by the Israeli government, dominated by the extreme right wing, unquote. Well, that caused the newly elected treasurer of the Democratic State Party to quit, saying the state party needed to be focused on electing Democrats and not sending out foreign policy statements. Democrats from Nevada's delegation responded, all saying they support Israel's right to defend itself. So here's what Congresswoman Dina Titus told the I-Team's Vanessa Murphy.
Both sides have a right to live in peace, but Israel also has a right to defend itself. We're hoping for an end to the violence because civilians are being killed. I didn't directly respond to the statement by the party.
Okay,
but I can say, generally speaking, the party doesn't make policy. It's there to help incumbents, help candidates, raise money, do field work, that sort of thing.
Fellow Democratic Congresswoman Susie Lee expressed a similar sentiment. Here is her statement saying, quote, I wholeheartedly condemn any statements that ignore the history and complicated nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the fact that Israel is under attack. Of course, that was before the ceasefire took effect. Nevada Senator Jackie Rosen is the chair of the key subcommittee on tourism in Washington, D.C. This week, she held a hearing focused on international tourism and travel in order to try and bring back American jobs. The Democrat pointed out how hard Las Vegas's economy has been impacted by the pandemic. She highlighted other states around the country that also depend on tourism and that they're also hurting. Senator Rosen is urging for change as the world emerges from the pandemic.
Was such a daunting challenge to overcome in order to fully recover from the pandemic and turn the corner toward economic growth. We must invest and promote tourism at a greater level than ever before.
They do. Senator Rosen says panels like these are the first steps to fully healing our national and local economy, specifically, of course, with tourism. Speakers for former Attorney General Adam Laxalt's conservative Basque Fry are taking shape. The Republican holds his annual fundraiser on August 14th up in Corley, Nevada. Laxalt says speakers this year at the GOP event will include Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and former U.S. Ambassador Richard Grinnell. The event raises money for Laxalt's Morning in Nevada Political Action Committee. In what to watch? Well, we've been talking about it throughout the entire program, but the last week of the legislative session in Carson City is here. So far, only a few dozen bills have passed, and we're keeping an eye on education funding, health care, pot lounges, and if any of the use of force or police reform bills will actually make it through. We're also keeping an eye on whether Governor Sisolak ends up using his veto pen during this legislative session. Also turning back the hands of time. Clark County goes back to its pre-pandemic rules June 1st, so we'll keep an eye on how that goes and if Nevada can slowly continue to get people vaccinated. It is a long process, to be sure. We'll keep an eye on that for you. We thank you very much for watching us here on Politics Now. You can stay up to date on all the political news online at 8newsnow.com, and you can watch us here every Saturday on Channel 8. We thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.